What is up, everybody out there in podcast land? How you doing? It is time for the latest, greatest episode of the Fortress of Rock. The final day of February 2025, February the 28th. We've got a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about. We're introducing some new work for Doc Brown as we travel back in time to look at a classic album, an overlooked classic album for the first time ever. We're going to be doing more and more of that here in 2025 here on The Fortress. Kind of like a kick in the butt for these newer performers, these acts that are still active. Get out there and put out new music so we don't have to go back in time to review the old stuff. Doc Brown doesn't like it. I don't like it. It's a necessary evil. That's coming up at the tail end of Breakdown. But of course, first and foremost, we always start off with news of the world. Our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. You know the drill by now. Some touring news, some news about other media, movies, TV and streaming stuff that pertains to classic rock. And of course, good news this week to start off, some updates on some new music. After I just went on a little mini rant at the beginning of this episode, we do have one update from last week and then one completely new, out of the blue, fantastic announcement when it comes to new music. So let's start off with that. He is up for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the first time ever. I have a very, very good feeling that he's going to get in. And that is Mr. Billy Idol. Billy Idol. Now, dismissing Fish from the fan vote. I, of course, have been voting every day, keeping track of who's up, who's down, and there hasn't really been a lot of movement since this opened up a few weeks ago. The Fish fans are out in numbers, but second, a distant second, but still second in the fan vote for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is Billy Idol. Perfect timing. A little bit of a PR move, a planned way to bump up his interest in 2025. Billy Idol has a brand new album coming out April the 25th. The album is called Dream Into It. It's 9 songs, and he is heavily stressing the fact that it is not only autobiographical. I kind of thought his last 2 EPs were autobiographical. But the new album, Dream Into It, is also autobiographical. And he says the songs fall in a chronological order, the 9 tracks on Dream Into It. So, as we expected, we get into the spring. Leading into the summer, we are getting news about new music. So once again, Billy Idol, brand new album, Dream Into It, out April the 25th. Now, I mentioned last week, last minute thing, dropped right before I started recording last week's episode, that the Counting Crows are going to finish up their project, the Butter Miracle Project. Of course, a few years back, they released 4 songs in an EP called Butter Miracle Sweet 1. Well, now we are getting the complete suites. And this is, of course, I mentioned last week. It is coming out May the 9th. The update I have is now 5 new songs will be added on to the 4 previously released songs. So we're getting a total of 9 tracks on the complete suites. So you can get out there and look and see what these song titles are. Still only have the 1 release so far. And of course, that's something else we mentioned last week, Spaceman in Tulsa. And we will discuss that a little bit more in the breakdown segment. But once again, May the 9th, for Counting Crows, Butter Miracle, the complete suites. All 9 songs in this project released. It looks like vinyl and CD along with digital. But the way things are going here in 2025, I'm not sure. The sources I have, very inconsistent. I see, yes, it's going out on vinyl. Yes, it's going out on CD. No, wait, it's not coming out on CD. Only vinyl, only digital. So I'm doing my best here to keep you guys up to date on this stuff. Now let's move on to not official new music news yet. Stanley and Simmons are recording together. No, not Paul Stanley and not Gene Simmons. We're not getting Kiss back together again in the studio. It is their sons. Evan Stanley, son of Paul Stanley, and Nick Simmons, the son of Gene Simmons, are working together, and social media posts lead us to believe that they have already recorded a full album, 10 songs, along with guitarist Jacob Bunton. So, what will this turn into? Will this become a full-fledged band? Just an interesting little side project for us to keep our eyes on and our ears in tune for, possibly coming up here in the near future. Now, in terms of TV, documentaries, movies, streaming, theatrical releases, all that good stuff, if you are a fan of U2, Bono, remember he put out his book, his autobiographical kind of sort of book a year or 2 ago? Well, now there will be an Apple TV Plus documentary to follow up on the book. Stories of Surrender will be out on Apple TV Plus May the 30th. We're still waiting on official word on a brand new U2 album that has been in the works at least for the last year. So we're hoping for that, but for right now we'll have to be happy with Bono following up on his book, as I mentioned, Stories of Surrender, the Apple TV Plus documentary, out May the 30th. And if you are a fan of Pink Floyd, by the way, you're going to notice I'll talk in this episode a lot about performers I don't like, that I'm not really fond of, but I do it for you as a public service. And this is one of them. Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd at Pompeii, 1972, where they played in the ruins of Pompeii. No audience. It, of course, has been restored, rediscovered, restored. All the modern bells and whistles have been added in. That will be in theaters April the 24th. And the soundtrack album will follow on May the 2nd. So big news for you Pink Floyd fans out there. Again, Pink Floyd at Pompeii, 1972. In theaters, April the 24th. The album out May the 2nd. Neil Young. We're going to give a lot of updates on Neil Young here in News of the World. Again, doing it for you. Doing it for all of you, not for me. He has a concert film, a concert documentary coming out. One night only in theaters, April the 17th. It is called Coastal. It documents his 2023 solo tour. And just like with Pink Floyd, there is an accompanying soundtrack album. That will hit the next day, April the 18th. So once again, Coastal, Neil Young concert documentary in theaters on April the 17th for one night only. And the album comes out the next day, April the 18th. All right, before we get into our touring news of the week, we do have some moments of silence, some people in the world of music to honor and acknowledge as they have passed away here over the past week or so. First up, Roberta Flack. Wonderful singer, wonderful voice, killing me softly with his song. The first time ever I saw your face. If you're ever in a mellow mood, I know a lot of you out there are headbangers. I've told you, I go all over the place. I can get mellow. I can get funky. Just because primarily I'm a headbanger doesn't mean I don't have the want, the need, the desire to listen to other types of music. Roberta Flack, some great mellow music to listen to. She will be missed. The great Roberta Flack has passed away. This one is bittersweet for me, because while I acknowledge the fact that two of, to me, the most significant songs, I didn't say the best, I didn't say my favorites, but two of the most significant songs from the 70s. Robert John. Now, Robert John sang The Lion Sleeps Tonight. A wee moe, a wee moe. You know it. But, as a huge fan of the Knack, you guys know this by now, I mention them as almost as often as I do Van Halen, it seems like, on this podcast. But Robert John is responsible, and again, this is why this is bittersweet for me. Again, he has passed away. Our thoughts and prayers out to his family, his friends, his fans. But his number one hit, Sad Eyes, knocked My Sharona out of the number one spot on the U.S. singles chart. One of the greatest songs of all time. Not Sad Eyes, My Sharona. Somebody was going to do it eventually. It just happened to be Robert John and Sad Eyes. It's not a bad song. It's not. But of course, for me as a Knack fan, a little bitter about Robert John's place in music history. And then finally, even though his last name was not Isley, he was a brother-in-law, I believe. Chris Jasper was a member of the Isley Brothers, and unfortunately, he has passed away. Now we move on to touring news. And by the way, great news. I hinted at this last week. I declared Quiet Riot, Aldo Nova now on the slate for right now our first concert review, which will be coming in midsummer of 2025. Now we have a second show slated for August of 2025. And we're going to stick with the 80s hair metal vibe. Why not? I'm trying to check bands off my bucket list. So, Aldo Nova, Quiet Riot. Now we're going to check Slaughter off the bucket list. Double bill, Quiet Riot and Aldo Nova. We mentioned the new one is Great White and Slaughter. As I mentioned, August, Shipshewana, Indiana. And we still might have another edition. So I'll give you another tease. Might not know about this one for a couple weeks, but we've got two slated now in July and in August. Yes, it's all about the 80s, hair metal, the hard rock. So again, from last week, Quiet Riot, Aldo Nova, new this week. Look forward to August for a review of Slaughter and Great White. Now, of course, Jack Russell has passed away. I have seen both versions of Great White, but I never saw the original version, unfortunately. But I have seen Jack Russell's Great White before he passed, and now, of course, this version of Great White where they've got a different lead singer, but a lot of the other core members of the original Great White are still in this incarnation. We talked about Neil Young, so let's get this out of the way. Neil Young has announced dates for his 2025 tour. In June and July of 2025, he will be overseas. He has 9 European dates set up right now. And then he comes back to North America in August and September for 15 North American dates. Of course, we mentioned the great news recently about Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini of Rat back together again. It is just a complete and total shame that we can't get the full, or at least as full of a reunion of Rat as we can get. This whole rift between Bobby Blotzer and Stephen Pearcy. Of course, you got Juan Crochet out there. So you could get 4 of the 5 original members of Rat back together if you wanted to, if they wanted to. Of course, the late, great Robin Crosby, not a factor, but I will take one of the lead guitarists and the lead singer getting together, getting along, it seems like. And we mentioned they are part of this big festival. What is the M3 Festival in Maryland coming up the weekend of May the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Now they've added, Pearcy and DeMartini have added a couple more dates. Sounds like there could be more coming. I would imagine demand will be very, very high. But for right now, they're playing a date in Connecticut, April the 5th, and they're playing Rock the Dam down in Kentucky, July the 26th, in addition to the M3 Festival in Maryland. For those of you who really, really, really want to bang your head, I mean to the point where you might give yourself brain damage, and again, I do this for you as a public service, Pantera has announced a 2025 tour. 29 dates in the United States, running from July through September. Now, if you're into Zeppelin, and I have to admit, lately I've been listening to some Led Zeppelin. Been listening to some Zepp lately. And this is how music it works. It's so wonderful. You just get in a mood for a certain band, a certain vibe, and for a week or two, that's what you're listening to. And I just kind of had a Zeppelin vibe here recently, listened to a lot of their old stuff. And then you have Jason Bonham, of course. I still don't like the way Sammy Hagar, to me, unceremoniously dumped Jason Bonham from the Best of All Worlds band. But Jason Bonham will be fine. He will be fine. He's back doing his Led Zeppelin evenings. And he has just announced that they're going to be playing. It sounds to me, I'm not going to say 100% for sure. I did not get 100% confirmation on this. But it sounds like for his 2025 tour, his Led Zeppelin evening, to celebrate the anniversary of Physical Graffiti, he will be playing this in its entirety. Close to being 100%, not quite there yet. But he's definitely playing a lot of it. If he's not playing all of it, he's playing a lot of Physical Graffiti on these dates. 21 dates in the U.S. in May of 2025. He says more are coming. And then finally, for concert news, Bachman Turner Overdrive is back. We heard that this might be coming down the road. The news is good. It has been set in stone. Now, I'm focusing on BTO here because this is kind of like a 3-part tour where BTO's playing some solo dates in the US, a lot of solo dates in Canada, and some dates in the United States with the Marshall Tucker Band. So you guys can do the research beyond that. That's a little bit too convoluted for me to cover here. I will just let you know that BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive, will be performing 18 dates in the U.S. in July and August. And before that, 22 dates up in Canada in April and May of 2025. So there you go, kids. That is News of the World for episode 185, February the 28th, 2025. Here on the Fortress of Rock. And we'll do it all over again next Friday and each and every Friday until the Maestro drops dead. Hopefully. Unless something better comes along. Just kidding. Just kidding. I am devoted to you, devoted to this podcast. So now we're going to move on to a different breakdown. Breakdown, of course, is our tribute to Tom Petty and his Heartbreakers, where we normally review the best in new music, albums, songs, and concerts. Not a lot of new music out there right now in terms of albums. Not a lot of concerts out there right now because of the weather. So, we do have one song review this week. And we're going to start off with a new song, and then we're going to move on to the garage a little bit earlier than normal and get in the rock and roll DeLorean, take a trip back in time. But instead of looking immediately at the anniversaries and the birthdays and all that good stuff, and I want to go back, we're going to do a review of an album from the past. An album that might have passed through, myself included, a lot of us diehard fans, without really getting noticed, not getting the proper attention it maybe deserved. So this is something we're going to start doing every once in a while. So it's going to be kind of a nether world, an in-between world between Breakdown and I Want to Go Back, where we travel back in time to review an old, underappreciated album. But first, like I said, one new song. And as you could probably tell over the last couple weeks, I am very, very, very excited about Counting Crows and the completion of this Butter Miracle album. Now, I will say this, because you guys know I'm not always about sunshine and roses and puppy dogs. So I will say that I'm a little disappointed that it has taken this long for Adam Duritz and the Counting Crows to put out 9 songs. Really? This long? Technically, if you look at their track history with new music, it's been 11 years. I'm pretty sure it's been 11 years since they put out their last full album. And now we're finally getting this piecing together of Butter Miracle. I will always say, with the way things are right now, I will take what I can get. But I'm still very disappointed in the lack of output from Counting Crows. Now, that being said, the first single from the second part, this is where it gets confusing. First single from the second part of Butter Miracle, but technically the first single off the complete suites. We already have heard 4 of these songs. So this is kind of the 5th song off of the complete suites. You see where I'm going with this? A little confusing. But let's put it this way. The first new song in years from Counting Crows, Spaceman in Tulsa. Now, you guys know I try to keep this clean for the kids the best I can. There is an occasional slip every couple of months. I don't mean to use the tawdry language, but it happens. And on my other podcast, Sports Frenzy 2.0, it's where I let loose. So that one is not for the kids. If you're an adult, you can handle F-bombs. Check it out. It's a great podcast with my friend Dave every Thursday morning and Saturday morning on all the great places that you would hear this podcast, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But this song, Spaceman in Tulsa, does have a lot of cursing in it, a lot of F-bombs. So just be forewarned, not suitable for work. That being said, it starts out a little slow, and you're kind of wondering, where are we going with this? And I know that I have faith. I have faith in Counting Crows, Adam Duritz as a songwriter. One of my favorite songwriters, great lyricist, and I should have known better. I should have known that this song was going to turn around after the first 45 seconds or so. Again, lots of profanity, but it is catchy as all get out. I love Spaceman in Tulsa. I can't get it out of my head. It is an earworm. A profane earworm, but an earworm nonetheless. Great choice for the first single, the first new song for them to put out. And they've always had guts. And for them, they can't play this on the radio. It's obvious. You're never going to get radio airplay with a song like this. Although I know some hip hop stuff, some rap stuff, stuff from Green Day, they play it on the radio and they just bleep stuff out, cut stuff out. I don't see how it could work with this song, Spaceman in Tulsa, but it's great. It's great, great, great. If you can get beyond the cursing, I think you'll appreciate this. I highly recommend, if, again, you're not overly sensitive to the lyrics, check out Spaceman in Tulsa from Counting Crows. And hopefully they will get things going now and put out some more new music a heck of a lot quicker than what they did with this long and drawn out Butter Miracle thing. Now, what I'm doing is I am purposely holding off on more new songs. Because what we're going to do next week is we're just going to knock out about half a dozen new songs. Of course, I will get into more detail next week. And I will let you know at the end of this episode what songs we will be reviewing in detail. I don't want to wrap it up for you, but I kind of hinted at this last week where we're going to take a little bit more of a loosey-goosey attitude towards future episodes and what we're going to review. Where we're going to be a little bit less regimented, a little bit less structured. I will give you a vague idea of what we're going to review. I will do my best. If I could go back to structuring it, I would. But again, with the lack of new material, no new albums, we've got to take the songs, review those when we can. That's why we're doing these old album reviews now. We're just about to head out to the garage. Yes, I'm paying Doc Brown overtime. I am not a tyrant. I'm giving him a little bit extra cash to do extra work here this week, and this will pop up, as I mentioned, every 2 or 3 weeks here now on the Fortress of Rock, where we look back at a classic album that was overlooked and underappreciated. So I'll talk a little bit more at the end of this episode about how do I say this? Finalizing the fact that we're going to be less structured. Sounds like, a little contradictory there, but it is what it is. So now, Doc Brown, very happy that he's getting a little bit extra moolah. So now I am walking out to the garage, getting ready to strap myself into the rock and roll DeLorean. No, we're not ready for I Want to Go Back yet. We're entering this hazy area where, yes, we're going to go into the rock and roll time stream, but we're going off in a different tunnel, a different tangent, a different area of the time stream, where for the first time ever, we're going to review an old album. But no, we're not going to bore you with an album that you know, you love, you've listened to hundreds of times. We're going to try to find albums that you and I overlooked from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, that maybe we should have given a second chance to. And there are plenty of them out there. I have listened to a ton of music, as you can probably guess, in my life. But just like all of us, you fall into the trap of comfort food, comfort music. and you bypass, based on timing, based on where you are in your life, you might have skipped over a band or an album that maybe you shouldn't have. And that's what we're going to start doing here, is we're going to start looking back at those albums. And our first album is Hanoi Rocks. Two Steps from the Move. This album was the album that was supposed to break them finally here in America. Now, Hanoi Rocks is a band from Finland. I know you can't remind me. I was going to say remind me in a few minutes to discuss Ultimate Classic Rock and what they think of Hanoi Rocks in terms of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But of course you can't remind me because this is a podcast I'm recording live. So once we get to the point, which we normally do right before, I want to go back and we'll mention Ultimate Classic Rock. That will at least spur me if I forget during my review. But Hanoi Rocks, we had the tragedy, of course, with Razzle, one of the members of Hanoi Rocks, Vince Neil of Motley Crue, driving under the influence, tragic accident. You can judge all you want. One way or the other, I think Vince Neil got off light because of his celebrity. That's just me. But Razzle died. And that pretty much brought an end to Hanoi Rocks. Now, Michael Monroe, the lead singer, went on to very limited success on his own. And Hanoi Rocks never really broke big in America. But Two Steps from the Move was that final album before that tragedy with Razzle that was starting to propel them forward. 10 songs on Two Steps from the Move. And of course, as we always do here on the Fortress of Rock, when we review an album, we will go through it track by track. So first impressions for Two Steps from the Move. Hanoi Rocks, at least on this album, schizophrenic is the first word that comes to mind. Now, critics will use that as a positive. And what I mean by that is they will say, oh, all the different influences. You hear punk and glam metal and funk and ska. And, okay. To me, that works to a point if the band is really, really good. If the band's really, really bad, it's messy and all over the map. So somewhere in the middle falls schizophrenic. Just bear with me over these 10 songs as I go through them, and I think you'll get a good feel for what I'm getting at here, okay? So we start off with what you would expect from an 80s band like Poison or Motley Crue or Van Halen. You get a cover song right off the bat. You get Hanoi Rocks' version of CCR's classic Up Around the Bend. It's okay. But so far what we're doing is we're playing exactly by the rules. Paint by numbers. The blueprint has already been set here in the 80s for these bands. You put together a good cover song of a previous massive hit. Right off the bat, Hanoi Rocks gets that out of the way. Then we all of a sudden want to go punk. Not like nasty hardcore punk, but just kind of punk light. with High School. I just, I don't know. Something about it. It's okay. But again, I am not, at this point, 2 songs in, not impressed at all with Two Steps from the Move. Then they start to get their stride going. Then they start to become Hanoi Rocks. They're not playing by the rule book anymore. They're not trying to be an 80s hair band with cover songs. They're not trying to be a late 70s punk band. They are being Hanoi Rocks. And the next 2 songs are stellar. Stellar. I Can't Get It and Underwater World are the high points of this album. And this is where the band is establishing their own identity. Creative, musically creative beyond belief, catchy. Now, I Can't Get It is a little bit more standard in terms of verse, chorus, verse. Underwater World kind of floats around a little bit, being a little more daring musically, challenging musically. I was at this point 4 songs in thinking, if they can keep this momentum up, I'll forgive the first 2 songs because they weren't bad. Unfortunately, the next 2 songs rip all the momentum away again, and they start falling back, at least with song 5, into the traditional 80s hair metal band blueprint. Track 5 is Don't You Ever Leave Me, which is the power ballad. Yes, you have to have the power ballad. It's decent. It's not the worst I've ever heard, but it's definitely not Every Rose Has Its Thorn either. Then track 6, I don't know what track 6 is supposed to be. And this is where the second half of the album, things get really muddy on some of these songs, where you really feel like the band does not know who they want to be. You can look at the songs individually. Like I said, Schizophrenic. There's a couple songs here on the back half where within the same song, they don't seem to know what they want to do or who they want to be. And Million Miles Away is the first one of these songs. There is saxophone on this song. The guitar work, as it is throughout most of this album, is very solid. But otherwise, the song never comes together. It is easily the worst song on the album. Now, luckily, they pick things up with Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Boulevard of Broken Dreams is a straight ahead, no frills, uncomplicated rocker. This is the song that probably should have been, I don't know for sure, I don't know what they released to radio first, but Boulevard of Broken Dreams, if it wasn't the first release, it should have been. Because it's the most accessible song. Even though I love I Can't Get It and Underwater World more, I can understand why they wouldn't want to put those out there right away, because they're a little more complex. Or Boulevard of Broken Dreams, again, is a straightforward, hooky, catchy rocker. But then things start to fall apart again. Track 8, Boiler, subtitled Me Boiler and Me. I don't understand a band from Finland trying to sound like they're a British punk band. And that's definitely what they're trying to push here on Boiler. They're even talking about or singing about England in this song. Again, decent guitar work, but this harkens back to High School, track 2, where again they're trying to sound punkish, and in this song, even to the point where they're trying to do the over the top British accents. So it's just very awkward. It's not a very good song overall. And then track 9 is Futurama, which again is a little bit messy. It sounds like, once again, the punk vibe, but I could hear a lot of Kiss influence in there. There are points in Futurama where I could basically hear their love of Kiss coming out of the speakers. But not the best song in the world. And then finally, track 10, at least they close things out on a high note with Cutting Corners. We bring the horns back in again. I don't know what the obsession is with the horns and the saxophone, but we bring the horns back in on Cutting Corners. It has the catchiest chorus of any of the songs on the album. You got to cut corners or fade away. Very cool. It's an earworm. It will get in your head and it will not let go. So if you're doing the math at home, as I know you probably are along with me, that's 4 songs out of 10 that I really highly would recommend. The rest of the album, So, once again, doing the rock and roll math, 4 out of 10, that does not qualify for a recommendation from the Maestro to you. But it was worth listening to. I will say that. It was worth listening to Hanoi Rocks to see if I had missed out on something. And as we go through this, again, every 2 or 3 weeks, we'll delve into the past and we'll jam an old cassette here into the cassette player in the DeLorean, or an old CD into the CD player. We'll figure out which of these albums we really regret not listening to originally. With Hanoi Rocks, 2 Steps from the Move, I will say worth listening to, worth going back and listening to. Overall, though, I don't know if I'm really going to stay up all night worrying about the fact that I could have been listening to this album back in the mid-'80s. There was better stuff out there, and I think I probably found it, as you did as well. Now, in a very tricky segue, I mentioned UltimateClassicRock.com. And as you guys know, as we move from this part of the rock and roll time stream back into the part where we look at birthdays and anniversaries, which of course is called I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. 3 main sources for a lot of the stories. Segment 1 and Segment 3. The Van Halen Newsdesk.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and UltimateClassicRock.com. Now, before we move off of Hanoi Rocks completely, I mentioned that I had something that would tie in UltimateClassicRock.com with Hanoi Rocks. It just so happens, and no coincidence here, I had already decided, along with my friend, weeks ago. He is a huge fan of this era of music like you and I are. And we decided for our other podcast we were going to listen to Hanoi Rocks. And then, separate altogether, just a few days ago, UltimateClassicRock.com puts out a very intriguing article about the 8 hair metal bands that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm giving them all the credit for this. But they had Hanoi Rocks as one of those 8 bands, which kind of, oh boy, I don't know about that. There's a lot of other bands like Styx, REO Speedwagon, Iron Maiden, Kansas, just to name a few. Those are the ones that always pop into my head first that need to be in before Hanoi Rocks. Believe me. And of course, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will screw it up and will continue to screw it up each and every year. As I said at the top of the podcast, I do have a good feeling, however, about Billy Idol getting in. I do not think Bad Company will get in. I know the Black Crowes aren't getting in. I think the White Stripes are going to fall short again. I have hope that Soundgarden will get in. My hope is Billy Idol, Soundgarden get in. And then, of course, they'll screw it up, and they'll put in Mariah Carey, and they'll put in Manya, this band from Mexico, and they'll put in Cyndi Lauper. It's fine, and Joe Cocker. Ugh. But I would highly recommend you get on ultimateclassicrock.com and do a search to read about the 8 80s hair metal bands that they think should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I will not spoil it for you. You can probably guess probably half of them. The one, of course, that I was extremely happy that they did not gloss over, because even though I know they're never going to get in, I would put them in. That is Rat. And we just talked about Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini. You could tell my enthusiasm about those 2 members of Rat getting back together. I will say, on top of Hanoi Rocks, UltimateClassicRock.com did me a solid, and they put Rat in as well as one of these 8 bands from the 80s hair metal genre that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So there you go. I have told you some of the help, some of the influences, some of the ideas, where I get those from. Of course, Doc Brown subtly getting us right into where we need to be just before we start in with our anniversaries and our birthdays. Do not forget where you can find the Fortress of Rock each and every Friday night. And you can always go back and listen to previous episodes. Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, Audible, and Good Pods. And then don't forget to check out the Facebook page for 2 great things we do every weekend. Let's go backwards. How about that? We're going back in time. So let's go backwards for once, change things up a bit. Every Sunday afternoon on our Facebook page, it's New Music Sunday, where you will find that I've posted a brand new YouTube video for a brand new song. And I try my best to change things up and make sure it's different artists every Sunday. But we have some artists that are putting out more new music than others. So, for example, the Cold Stares seem to pop up on New Music Sunday every couple months. I do the best I can, though, to try to vary it, to try to find the most applicable video, song, for what we try to do here with classic rock, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Then, tonight, Friday night, of course, this brand new episode of the Fortress of Rock drops, but so does the Weekend Rock Project. The Weekend Rock Project is where I will give you an idea, a phrase, a word, a theme, and you will come back with your best, your favorite rock song that fits whatever parameters I have given you. And I can tell you right now, it's out there right now as you're listening to this. The last day of February, right? Today is February the 28th, the last day of February. Tomorrow is the first day of March. First and last. So let's get your favorite rock and roll songs that feature either or. The word first or the word last, and just for fun, in between. Between. So, first, last, between. Those are the three words that you have to play with for this weekend's Weekend Rock project. Your favorite rock songs featuring the words first or last or between. And if you can double up, you get bonus points. And then, of course, we will award our fictional prize that doesn't exist if you happen to come up with the best, most popular, coolest pick every week. All right. Doc Brown, I'm looking at him. He looks good. Even with the extra work, he still looks like he's ready to go. So let us dive into I Want to Go Back. We've got our birthdays. We've got our anniversaries. We will start off with birthdays this week for February the 28th. Starting off February the 28th, 1969. They've got a couple good songs. Okay? I'll give them that. A couple good songs. Lead singer for the band Train, Pat Monahan, born on this day in 1969. Now here's a band that I always thought was vastly underrated. And once again, let me stress the fact that I do listen to, despite my daughter saying I'm a music snob, she is wrong. I listen to all sorts of music. And in the 80s, I didn't just listen to hair metal. I listened to everything and anything. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in a few minutes. But one of the types of music that I listened to was that European synth pop that was big, along with every genre. Every genre in the 80s was big. Because we loved our music, we listened to it nonstop, we watched MTV nonstop. Level 42. Something About You, one of the catchiest songs ever. Lessons in Love was another big hit of theirs. Their drummer, Phil Gould, born on this day in 1957. Drummer for Level 42. Also born on this day, February the 28th in 1957, Cindy Wilson, one of the vocalists for the B-52s. Down, 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 down. Now, these next few birthdays I'm going to set aside here because you and I have preconceived notions about who's in a band. The classic lineup for a band, right? Van Halen, it's always been a quartet. You know, the lead singer has shifted in and out. The bass player shifted in and out. And there, for example, one of our birthdays here that we're going to discuss is, again, 1957, February the 28th, 1957. When I say Tears for Fears, who do you think's in the band? Most of us would say Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith, right? It's basically a duo. is what we would commonly think. As I always say, I learn something new every week when I do the research for this podcast. There were a couple other musicians that floated in and out of the band as legitimate members of Tears for Fears, and one of them was Ian Stanley. Ian Stanley was the keyboard player for Tears for Fears throughout their most popular years, yes, including songs from the Big Chair. So Ian Stanley, keyboard player for Tears for Fears, born on this day in 1957. Now, continuing with this theme, Black Sabbath. Most of us think of that initial quartet, right? Featuring Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler and Bill Ward. I think I'm right, if my rock and roll brain is not letting me down. But there were other players as well. Now, I'm not talking about lead singers. We all know Ronnie James Dio was in Black Sabbath for a while. But did you know, born on this day, December the 28th, February. February the 28th. I don't know why I came up with December. February the 28th, 1948. Jeff Nichols was born. He was, for quite a while, officially the keyboard player for Black Sabbath. Now, he was part of that Ronnie James Dio era. And so you could still say that classic quartet featuring Ozzy, that was true. That was the bare bones classic Black Sabbath foundational lineup. But they went through a whole lot of different changes in lead singers, and yes, there were different members in the band. And Jeff Nichols, keyboard player for Black Sabbath, born on this day, not December, but February 28th, 1948. I'm sorry, I don't like to stop and re-edit. It takes too long. It's too cumbersome. It drives me crazy. So you guys will have to put up with the one or two mistakes every week that I happen to put out there, because I quickly recover, because that's the professional that I am. And you want more cool information that I found out doing research. So we had the Tears for Fears situation. Keyboard player, didn't realize he was an official member. Black Sabbath, keyboard player, didn't realize he was an official member. That one probably a little less shocking to me. I mean, you look at going back to Tears for Fears, you look at the cover of songs from the Big Chair, it's Orzabal and Smith on the cover. So you're not sitting there going, there's more people in this band, it's these two guys. No, not true. Now, one of those great artists from the early 80s that I loved, born on this day, February the 28th, 1943, Donnie Iris. Aliyah. And Love is Like a Rock. Two great, great songs from Donnie Iris. Now, the part that I did not know when it comes to Donnie Iris, again, born on this day, 1943, he was for a brief period of time a member of Wild Cherry. Yes, Play That Funky Music. He was not part of the band when they put that song out. Their defining moment came on a little bit later on. But still, for a period of time, Donnie Iris was a member of Wild Cherry. Again, love learning new stuff. Love learning new stuff. That's why I want to be immortal. People who say they don't want to live forever, they're nuts. Because you're going to learn new things every day. Every day. There's so much to read, so much to listen to, so much to watch. Why would you not want to live forever? And unfortunately, somebody who did not live forever, did not live even close to a normal lifespan, is going to wrap up our birthdays, and that would be Brian Jones, one of the founding members of the Rolling Stones, born on this day, February the 28th, 1942. Of course, he tragically drowned shortly after being dismissed from the band that he helped to create. So once again, Brian Jones, rock and roll legend, co-founder of the Rolling Stones, born on this day in 1942. Now, as far as anniversaries go for February the 28th, this is one we covered last year around this time on the Fortress of Rock. February the 28th, 2024, the inventor of the talk box. Of course, the most famous examples of the talk box would be Peter Frampton and Richie Sambora in Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer. Bob Heel, the inventor of the talk box, passed away on this day last year, 2024. On this day, February the 28th, 2010, longtime bass player for Hall & Oates, 1981 to 2010, up until he died. Again, that was today, in 2010. Tom T-Bone Walk, unfortunately, passed away. On this day, February the 28th, 2008, another rock and roll death, passing, Buddy Miles. Buddy Miles was the drummer for the short-lived Band of Gypsies. Of course, that was the final group that Jimi Hendrix was involved in before he died. On this day, February the 28th, 1986, George Michael announced that Wham was going to call it quits. Of course, Wham, as we all think we know, after this Tears for Fears stuff, I don't know anymore, but Wham, we would say, was George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley. George Michael announced on this day in 1986 Wham was coming to an end. They were going to put out, I believe, a greatest hits package, a couple songs, and do one final concert, and that was going to be it. By the summer of 1986, Wham was done. On this day, February the 28th, 1985, David Byron passed away. He was a vocalist from 1969 to 1976 for Uriah Heep. On this day, February the 28th, 1983, U2 released their third album, War. Of course, that featured Sunday, Bloody Sunday. On this day, February the 28th, 1981, this is where I'm going back. I did not forget. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, where I am not a music snob, and there was so much great, diverse music in the 80s. I'd never, ever want to hear anybody disparage 80s music, because country music, as huge as it is now, as massively popular as it is now, I don't like it. It's too, I don't know, it's too generic, it's too poppy for me, a little too cookie cutter. But back in the early 80s, country, massive crossover appeal on the Billboard pop charts. Here is a perfect example. One of my favorite songs from the 80s. On this day, February the 28th, 1981, I Love a Rainy Night by Eddie Rabbitt was the number one song in the U.S. on the pop charts. I mean, you had Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, Waylon Jennings, Eddie Rabbitt, so many, Oak Ridge Boys, so many country artists crossing over, having massive success on the pop charts. And they were great songs. Great songs. Eddie Rabbitt was one of my favorites, if not my... I loved Alabama, too, back then. But Eddie Rabbitt was probably my favorite country artist in the 80s. Once again, I Love a Rainy Night was the top pop song in the U.S. on this day in 1981. And then finally, let's revisit the charts with another tremendous, dare I say, one of the greatest songs ever written. I dare say so. On this day, February the 28th, 1970, Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel was the number one song on the pop charts in the United States. Just an unbelievably gorgeous song. Fantastic song. And of course, you would expect nothing less from the great Paul Simon. So there you go, kids. We're pulling, finally, Doc Brown, after doing extra duty, we're pulling the rock and roll DeLorean back into the garage here at the Fortress of Rock. Weather's getting better. Weather's getting a little better. The light at the end of the tunnel is there. Spring is coming. The moat is not frozen. Pretty soon, we'll see fish. And then we'll have to mow the lawn outside the Fortress of Rock. And, better than shoveling snow. But yes, the DeLorean is back in the garage. We're pulling the drawbridge up over the not frozen moat. Turning off the outdoor lights. Getting ready to settle in for a nice, relaxing Friday night. But we're not done here yet as I walk back to the studio. One final segment left. We've talked about the past. A lot about the past this week. We've talked about the present. Current news when it comes to classic rock. Now it's time to look to the future as we move on to wrap it up. Our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Alright, so as I alluded to this earlier, that we're going to be a little less structured for the time being here when it comes to wrap it up, looking at the future. I will tell you this. Next week, mentioned it earlier, lots of new songs. So we're going to hold off on taking another trip back in time. We'll find an album. I believe I mentioned last week. If I didn't, I'm thinking of going back to the 90s for our next journey back for an underappreciated album. And the band that was the precursor for Queens of the Stone Age, with Josh Homme, Kiss. No, not Kiss. Kiss. KYUSS. And their final album, And the Circus Leaves Town, I've been listening to that. That's potentially, when we get around to it, the next classic album review that we're going to do, but not next week. I will list the songs here in a minute that we will be looking at next week, and it's a lot. So it will definitely be a full-on half-hour breakdown segment. In 2 weeks, hopefully, if not in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, for sure, because I'm cutting it close here, based on when it's released and how much time I'll have to watch it before the episode is ready to post. But I'm hoping in 2 weeks. That would be episode 187, dropping on March the 14th. That's when I will get to review the lost Tom Petty movie from Cameron Crowe, The Heartbreakers Beach Party, which hits Paramount Plus on March the 11th. So I've only got a couple days in there. I will do my best. I will make time if I can. I don't believe the basketball tournament, March Madness, will have started yet. So that means that I might actually have that Thursday night open to watch Heartbreakers Beach Party the night before the new episode of The Fortress. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if my sports brain and my music brain, they're all working together in perfect synchronicity. But that's all I'm going to give you for right now in terms of what we're planning for the next few weeks. Don't want to get into the point where I'm committing for stuff that, number one, I'm not really enthusiastic about reviewing, or things that are too far off in the future. I know I've been talking about, I'm going to end up watching that Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary concert, and now I look at it and it's looking less likely. Same thing with that Fire Aid concert, looking less likely. So, again, a little bit loosey-goosey here from now into the near future with giving you what we're going to be reviewing. You'll just have to stay tuned every Friday night. You know it's going to be awesome. You know it's going to be great. We're just going to do it a little bit more on the fly than we have in the past few years. At least for the time being. Once we start getting new albums coming out, where we can slot them in one every week, then the structure will return. Now, as far as the songs, I was talking about all these new songs I have got to get to, I've got to review. They've just been dumped on me in this massive flood over the last week or two. A couple of songs featuring either the full band or members of the Cold Stares. The Cold Stares, the Southern, you remember we reviewed the Southern last year, 2024. They're putting out the Southern Part 2. Don't have a specific date, but it will be out, from what I can tell, in June. So the Southern Part 2 from the Cold Stares will be out in June of 2025. Little More Rope is the new single. We'll review that for you. That's guaranteed for next week. Their lead singer, Chris Tapp, also has some solo work on the way. His second new song here over the last few months has been released. It is called Red-Headed Blues Again. And so we'll have that for you as well. Maybe not next week. That one might be 2 weeks out. This one definitely will be next week. Billy Idol, we mentioned. Brand new album, Dream Into It, coming out April the 25th. The first single is out. Definitely will be part of this massive song review festival next week. Still Dancing from Billy Idol next week in our breakdown segment. Also guaranteed for next week, one of our favorite bands here on the Fortress of Rock, the Black Moods, their new song, I Want Your Love. That will be reviewed next week. Maybe, possibly. This is one of those on the fence songs where I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do, if I'm going to review it or just dismiss it. The Black Keys. We talked about a few weeks ago, they've got a new album coming out at some point in 2025. I am not the biggest fan in the world of the Black Keys. They are one of those acts, one of those bands, right on the fence for me. I don't despise them like I do Pink Floyd or Neil Young or Eric Clapton, but I definitely don't love them. So every once in a while they'll put out a cool song, but they're just so arrogant and so pretentious. The Night Before by the Black Keys, maybe next week. I will say this. If it's not next week, it's probably not going to happen. How about that? Second single from Craig Finn of the Hold Steady, his upcoming solo album. The second single is called Bethany. Of course, last week, one of our number one songs, one of our top songs was from Craig Finn. That was, of course, People of Substance. So his new single, Bethany, is out now. We'll have that for you most likely next week. That could be a couple weeks out. And then finally, how about this? How about this? We just had a phenomenal collaboration between Sammy Hagar and Joe Bonamassa. Fortune Teller Blues spent multiple weeks at the top of our Fortress of Rock song chart. And now, an unreleased single featured on Rick Springfield's Greatest Hits Volume 2 that just came out. A collaboration between Rick Springfield and Sammy Hagar. Now, of course, you know the history. After Jesse's Girl, Rick Springfield's next big hit was I've Done Everything for You, and that was a song written by Sammy Hagar. So they, of course, have a connection. They have just released part of this Greatest Hits Part 2 for Rick Springfield. This, I guess it's a long-forgotten, unreleased single, Party at the Beach Bar. That sounds very appropriate for these two. So Rick Springfield, Sammy Hagar, Party at the Beach Bar, coming up. That should be next week on the Fortress of Rock in the breakdown segment. So like I said, lots of new music. Now, a segue, as we segue to what we always end up wrapping the show up with now each and every week, of course, is our Fortress of Rock charts. Our tribute to the old Billboard charts, not the new Billboard charts, but the old Billboard charts from the 70s and the 80s when they actually mattered and seemed to know what they were doing. As I'm about to tell you, a shocking album that has taken over our number one slot this week on the Fortress of Rock charts. It is an album that we will probably have for you next week, but the reason why I haven't been touting it is because it's a very limited edition album. Now you can listen to it on Spotify, so when I say limited edition, I mean that in the physical sense. It's very hard to get a hold of, hard to buy, but you can listen to it on Spotify. And we talked about it here a few weeks ago. It is Rick Emmett. Rick Emmett, of course, co-lead singer and, of course, phenomenal guitarist for Triumph. He has put out this book / album. Again, the physical album, physical CD is limited. The book is available. I know it's on Amazon. You don't get the CD with it, though. Keep that in mind. It's just the book where he discusses these 10 songs that he put together. The album is called 10 Telecaster Tales. It is a short, it's barely over half an hour, a short, all-instrumental album. 10 guitar-driven songs. The book describes his approach to these 10 songs, as well as his overall approach to writing and recording music. So it's a very unique hybrid release. The cat's out of the bag. I just told you, your number one album this week here on the Fortress of Rock is Rick Emmett's 10 Telecaster Tales. I've actually listened to it quite a bit here over the last week. Is it cheating because it's instrumental? Some would say yes. Some would say no. But I do try to listen to different music. I don't want to listen to a new album to the point where I ruin it for myself. So I will do my best to always try to jump around to listen to different new music when I can. So instead of going back to Tremonti, for example, I decided this was the album this week I would focus on, in addition to all the other old stuff, the Hanoi Rocks and other classic albums and songs. But your number one album, and the review might be coming, should be coming next week, Rick Emmett's 10 Telecaster Tales. All instrumental. Your top songs of the week. Of course, I cheat. I always pick a couple. If you couldn't figure out from my review back in Breakdown, one of those songs is Counting Crows. Spaceman in Tulsa. Exceptional. Profane, but exceptional. And then a song we'll review next week for you. I could have done it this week. I could have. But I wanted to space things out a little bit. Didn't want to give you too much in terms of great, awesome reviews, and then have next week be full of stuff that maybe isn't all that great. Haven't listened to these songs yet. So knew I was going to hold off on this one to make sure at least I had one great review for you next week. Our other top song this week on the Fortress of Rock is Little More Rope by the Cold Stairs. And if you guys haven't been able to tell over the last 6 or 8 months with how often I have put the Cold Stairs at the top of either the album chart or the song chart, you need to listen to this band. Straight on hard rock blues, nothing complicated. It is comfort food for your rock and roll blues soul. They are solid. So once again, your top songs of the week. Spaceman in Tulsa by Counting Crows. And Little More Rope by the Cold Stairs. Top album of the week is Rick Emmett's 10 Telecaster Tales. So that will do it for this episode of The Fortress of Rock. I am your humble and gracious host, the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla. I am the Maestro Kevin Crane. You are, of course, who you are. And thank you as always for checking me out every Friday night You can always go back and listen to the old episodes. That's a great thing. Doing a sports podcast like I do with my buddy, that's timely. You know, if you don't listen to that podcast within the first couple days after it's posted, it kind of loses your interest. It doesn't really have any relevancy. That's not true with the Fortress of Rock, especially when it comes to the reviews, even looking back at the historical events for a particular day. That can be fun. Listen to it any time you want. And I've already told you where, but we'll do this again in 7 days. As I said, weather's getting better outside. That means outdoor concerts are just around the corner. We're starting to schedule them here. I told you now, we went one last week, one this week, maybe one next week. Starting to fill in slowly but surely the Fortress of Rock concert schedule for 2025. I am again the Maestro Kevin Crane. Take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones. Love the one you're with. And until we do this again in 7 days, love you guys. You're the best. Peace out.